welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Ruth Craddock. And
I'm Rae Davidson.
yeah, that's Ray. And welcome back to another episode of Paperback Flicks. We're talking Little Women, the book and the multiple iterations of the movies. And yeah, so let's start talking about the book first. Ray, what do you think of the book?
I had never read the book, and I have always had a copy of it. You ready to see this?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that looks super old.
So, it was originally written in 1868. My copy is 1847.
Whoa.
I have no idea why, but we have always had that book. And when I got married, I took it. I was like, I need to have this. My mom's like, okay, but I still never read it until for this. So,
Wow. Cool.
but I was struck by how much there is in it. Like, there's a lot in this book. It kept going,
Mm-hmm.
but I liked it though. I like a lot about it. Did you have?
It is interesting how like you get so much more of the future with the girls. Like it doesn't just end at like a certain point. Like it kind
Mhm.
of feels like when you're used to things ending a little more like cleanly and having more of like a precise clean ending, like it's a little off-putting when the ending just keeps going. Especially with all of the movies, uh they end they don't generally show the rest of their lives. They
Yeah.
go up to a certain point and then it stops, and that's all they do. And that's fine. And that makes sense for movies. You have to tell, the best version of the story you can in a short period of time. But it was interesting to actually see them grow up and see what happened to them. Like not just a few years in the future, but like all the way till they got married and stuff and
Yeah.
became mothers and whatnot. So,
Yeah. And I liked so sometimes the author, what's her name? Louisa Alcott, Louisa May
mhm.
Alcott. So sometimes it felt a little preachy, but I didn't mind it. It felt like a mom trying to be like, baby, I need you to understand this, you know? And so she would like spell something out for you here and there that I think if some people read it, they're like, ugh, why is she always preaching to me? But I really liked it.
That's kind
I,
of the point of this book, though. Like it's
yeah,
entirely like I wouldn't say it's a fable, but it's like I don't know what the right word is for it, but it's essentially a, s- a story meant to teach you about like the right priorities, what matters, what doesn't, how to handle things, how to deal with things. And, it would be in some ways simpler or easier for people to take if it was written from like the mom's perspective, but then you wouldn't get in the heads of all the girls. And
right.
so it wouldn't quite work that way. So it works as like the third person the way it is now. But it's still, I don't know. I always really enjoyed this story because I loved the mom. I loved the quiet way of the mom. She wasn't overly pushy. She wasn't demanding. But at the same time, she didn't just let the kids walk all over her. She let them she gave them a little bit of leash and then let them sort of see how far they could go until they realized they were just
Mhm.
hanging themselves.
Right.
I love that because it just shows that she respects their process of growing up, that at some point they need to learn to do these things themselves. And
Yeah.
I love that growing up, but then as a mom reading it again now, so I read it when I was a teenager, and then reading it now as a mom, I'm like, oh, this reads so differently from this perspective. And I mean, I don't know, it was like moving and enlightening. And even though I've already read it before, it was still like, wow, this is the kind of book you should read multiple times throughout your life. Because in different phases, it's going to mean something else. You're going to get something else out of it.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed reading it again. And I actually really love the way she writes. I know that nowadays people want the author to butt out and not have an opinion and just tell the story and tell us what you think. I'm sorry, I disagree with that. And I love that she's there. You feel the author's presence, that she's a part of the story, but she feels like she's one of the characters.
Right.
Even though like she's not a character, like yeah, you're aware that somebody is talking to you and that it's not just this omniscient person, but somebody who's very invested and involved in what's going on and knows how everybody feels. And like, you know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, no, I get that. Like the voice of the narrator, so either the narrator is a character, like you're saying, like you see it from someone's perspective and they're telling you their story or whatever, and that's fine. But then for me, when the author cuts in, this is not your story. Stop it. This is whoever's story. You know what I mean?
uh-huh.
Like I kind of feel like I wasn't paying attention to you. I was paying attention to the character that was telling me the story.
Mhm.
But in this case, the voice is the narrator. And so, like you said, she is her own character. The narrator is their own character. So when she is saying, and so she learned the thing that all new wives,
Mhm. Yeah,
like I like that because you are telling me a story.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I really liked that. And it didn't pull you out. Like that's another thing that I said before, that there are some books, especially, that when all of a sudden the author is like, now let me stop and explain. I'm like, well, you just pulled me out of the story.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah, like
you know,
because it's a consistent part of the style, it's done throughout the story. It
hmm
feels natural and it doesn't feel jarring. Yeah, I agree. Like
right.
when it's not done consistently and it just randomly shows up, you're like, oh, they didn't know how to write that, so they're just gonna tell me. They couldn't show me, so they're just gonna tell me it. And it's like, okay, that's a lazy moment, but whatever. But this, that's part of how it was written. Like older authors, like they wrote with a moral in mind, with a purpose and a point to the story, not just like a tale or like, oh, this happens, this happens, but because they were trying to send a certain message. And you get that with older writings, like with Dickens, and I'm not gonna remember anyone's name now that I'm sitting here saying him, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that era of writer, they had a way of making sure that you understood what they were trying to say. And they told it through imagery in the book, but they also, from time to time, sort of added a little narration, like or a little moral, a little thing here and there. And I enjoyed that. I don't understand why people don't like that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's charming.
Yeah. I think it was very well done. Yeah, like you said, it did hail to like Dickens or Austen or Bronte sisters, like
Hmm.
kind of that um narrator's voice. I don't know if
Yeah,
there's a better term for it. That's
probably is, but we're not going to think of it right now because that's how it works. But yeah, so things that I liked that are in the book that are not in any of the movies that I've seen.
Mhm.
Um, shoot, my brain's gonna go dead, of course. So was there anything in the book that you liked that wasn't in any of the movies?
Yes. So, first of all, I like that the book does look at everybody in the sisterhood.
Hmm.
Yes, it's got a little bit more Joe because she just has more story to tell, but I felt like because I grew up with a movie in particular, but like I grew up knowing the movie version that's narrated by Josephine. And
Hmm.
so I thought this was Joe's story. And reading it, and there's entire chapters about Meg and Amy, and I'm getting into the heads of everyone, and I
Yeah.
loved it. I was happy to see all the sisters. Turns out I identify much more with Meg in the book.
Mm, okay.
And I would have never known that just based on the movies because I feel like they were pretty Joe-centric
Yeah.
typically.
Sure.
Um, in fact, my favorite chapter of the whole book, I wrote it down. Chapter 38. It's Meg when they're like, uh, she had the babies. The babies are about a year old. She's had
Mm,
the twins are about a year old, year and a half, something like that. And she's like, oh, he doesn't help around the house. He just goes over to his friend's house. And
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've had that. I've got two sisters. They've had it. When we complain, my mom is like, yeah, we all have that. And in the book, like they're like, true, he shouldn't have just taken the easy option of going to the friend's house. Also, why do you think he went over to the friend's house? You
Yeah.
know?
Is there a reason why he did that? You don't get
Yeah, you turn
as.
yeah, kind of the whole like the little mini moral of like you're a wife and a mother. You are not just a mother, like
Yeah, you didn't
because
stop being that person because you became a mom.
right. Because like that's a huge deal. Like I know people who have gotten divorces over these like problems that start here. Like there's two families I can think of and I loved all of them. And they ended up splitting up. Both of them ended up splitting up over similar thing. Like in the beginning, it was similar things, and then it like snowballs into like bigger problems because they grow apart because of this. Because of she just was like, I'm all about the kids. Everything is kids. My whole life is kids. And then he's like, cool. What if we spend an hour together? And she's like, but the kids. And so he's like, fine, you know what? I'll go find somewhere where I can be happier. And I'm like, everyone needs to read this book.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I really appreciated that. I thought that was really, again, that's something I appreciated more now than I did before. And like I don't remember if I even like if it even registered in my mind before. Like reading it this time, I was like, I almost feel like I haven't read this version of the book, but which we know is totally possible with me. Um, but if I had read it before, it didn't make the same impact. It was really interesting to read it now as again, like a mom of 16, 17 years to be like, oh, I've been there. I know what that's like to be, that transition between just being the two of you into being parents. And then how do you make it all work together? How do you grow as a family? And how do you
mhm.
keep it all, together? And it was really nice. I really enjoyed reading it. And I feel like I could identify with both the mom and Meg and the perspectives of like what's going on. And I feel like in some ways, because of the way my parents were in their relationships, sort of taught me not to take certain things for granted. And at the same time, I was also trying to be like uber mom, but like I decided early on I would always make my husband a priority. That, it's a rule whenever we leave or go someplace. If we're going to go separate ways, we always kiss. He can't leave without kissing me. This is the rule. It must be done. It's in the fine print of the marriage contract, amongst other things. But I've really tried to keep him centered and keep him as much involved in the, the raising of the kids and kept our relationship as strong as I could. At the same time, I do sometimes feel like I have to step in between my husband and my kids and be sort of the buffer. And sometimes like they can be two extremes where he can be a little too like um what's the word? Strict or too
Mhm.
demanding, and they can be just too complaining. And that's what I really enjoyed the chapter that talked about when she's trying to make the changes, like the mom suggested, and she's trying to put the kids down early so she can have dinner with the husband and everything. And the one little boy twin keeps coming down, and he's like, "No, no, mama, come with me." Blah blah blah. And the father, like, John, good man. He steps up. He's like, "No, this has gone long enough. We need to teach him." And like that whole process of it, she's like, but be nice to him. Like, don't make him cry. Like, I get that. It's one of the funny things about parenthood is that like, yes, you want us to smother him with love and just like kiss him and you don't want anything horrible to happen to him. But at the same time, if you treat them like they're a Fabergé egg, they will be completely incapable of doing anything because they're fragile and they can't
Mhm.
handle anything. So you have to teach them. You can't just give them everything they want. You have to teach them boundaries. And so I really enjoyed that
Yeah.
chapter because it reminded me a lot of what it's like. I can see her wanting to be like, okay, don't be too rough. But, same time, they do need discipline. And so yeah, I like this book because it feels like it's very real. It teaches very wholesome values, but it's very true to real life. And I love
Yeah.
that it's written in 1860,
1868. Yeah.
1868, and it's still true today. The same
Yeah.
concepts are still true. It's like some things are a little outdated. Nobody goes around just marrying for money anymore. I mean, there's some people that do that, but it's not like a thing really anymore. But all the other things, relationship things, figuring things out, knowing how to talk to people, how to deal with like your temper, all these things they talked about, they're universal themes. They're things that are just as prevalent now. And I love that this book is the kind of story that grows with you, that it can mean a lot to you when you're a young person and you're going through these things like Joe and Meg and Amy and Beth, like, and they're going through all those things. And then it can also mean a lot to you when you get older. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I also really love that the sisters all kind of represent a different type of person. And,
Mm-hmm.
like, sometimes that's very true, where like it seems like every child is very different than the next. And sometimes there's ones that have some similarities, but I like that the sisters, they like certain things, they get along on certain things, but they do all have their own personalities. They're not just copies of each other. And it's interesting. It's fun and it makes it feel real, very real, and they feel like real people, like
Yeah.
characters in a book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I also liked at the end, um, Joe and what's his name? Mr. Bear,
Yeah,
their
Frederick.
actual like romance, their actual love story, so much better than every movie. Like I swear the first movie that I saw was made in 1933, and I
Oh,
swear they were like, let's condense the ending, let's give it a good, and every other movie since then has just been like, yeah, let's just do that one. Like
like that was simple. Yeah,
because their actual romance, he comes and spends like what, a month or two, maybe more than that, like
yeah, and they
with
keep
the
visiting.
family. And
Yeah,
yeah, he gets to know them and they all love and respect him. And the
yeah, he
whole
loves
thing
on
with
everybody.
yeah, the whole thing with him being like, well, I'm gonna move out west, and she's like, oh well, come tripping with me, whatever. And like they like have like that little day together, and he
Hmm.
has there's nothing about him printing her book that's not even a thing
And
in the book.
I don't mind that in the movie. That is a kind of a sweet little thing that like
Right.
he was sort of talking to her about her writing before. Like, and
Right.
not as much in the book as they do it in the movie, but I understand why they made that change because it's a nice little extra thing that he believes in her so much that he
Yeah.
gave her work to somebody he respected. Because
Yeah.
he wouldn't have done that if he didn't think that what she was giving him was the best that he
Right.
could do.
Well,
So
and
I appreciate that.
they had to create the novel because she does in the book, she does write a novel like years and years before. And
Mhm.
she kind of doesn't care about it. Like that's the thing is she always wants to be a writer for the sake of writing, and she
Yeah.
doesn't ever really care about the work that she does. And she never has the big like magnum opus for Beth novel of her and her sisters that doesn't actually happen in the book. And so
Yeah,
there
it's
is
not like
no
really like she's writing something, but they don't ever spell out that,
yeah.
oh, this is all about my family or this is for Beth or anything like that.
Yeah.
And
And then
yeah,
oh well, and then they do have the book does have him bring like a poem that again is like a thing that she's like, oh, this is like garbage. But
hmm,
he's like, no, this poem, like the poem was for her sisters. There's a verse for each of them.
hmm,
Well, her and her sisters. And in hers, there's the line about, oh, love, come find me, whatever that is.
hmm,
And that's what convinced him that he should make this grand gesture of coming out there.
yeah,
And I thought that was so sweet that he was like, I read this and I felt that whether or not you intended it. That
yeah,
was so sweet. That poem, I didn't cry. Like I knew Beth was gonna die,
yeah,
so I wasn't super sad. I was touched that the character was like a saint. She's like, it's okay, I'm okay, and I'm like,
yeah,
what? But that poem, Beth's part of that poem, that did make me cry. Like that one got me a little misty-eyed, and I was like, oh, see, I'm so glad that that's in there, and I'm sad that it's not in any of the movies, but I do understand, like you said,
yeah,
I understand that they were like, this is a whole separate, like the Joe and Mr. Bear story could be a completely separate story,
yeah.
and they just didn't have time for it. So I get it, and I'm fine with it, but I am glad I don't know. I like that story more. That story feels more true to Joe. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Yeah, I do like it does make sense that Joe would need like a gentle nudging into love, like not like an aggressive attack. And then
Hmm.
like the way he goes about it, like coming and meeting the family and get like talking to the dad, bonding with the dad, bonding with the grandkids, kind of just getting to know everybody. It helps her kind of feel comfortable with the idea of him within her family and like him in a more familiar setting. And I just love the gentle way in which he pursues her. Like he doesn't try to push. Like
Hmm.
he's clearly crazy about her, but like he doesn't want to make her feel like he's trying to push something. He really doesn't have any reason to believe for sure that she's gonna say yes to him. But she might be crying. Um, but there's enough there. And like, yes, the poem is very touching. And I love that. That does sort of make more sense why he shows up. And I think that's why they do the thing with the book. That she writes the book to sort of deal with her feelings of losing Beth, and then she sends it off to him to so she'd be like, "This is, wanted me to write something real about myself. Here's here's my book. This is me." And then, he publishes it and brings her the copy, whatever. And so that's a nice way to condense the story and have a reason for him to be there that doesn't take a long time. So
Hmm.
I appreciate that, but especially since I did grow up with the 1997 version of the movie,
Hmm.
with Susan Sarandon as a mom, um,
Yeah.
Winona Ryder,
Winona Ryder.
Joe,
Hmm.
Annie McDowell. Is Annie McDowell? Not that
I
Annie.
don't know.
I forget the name of this
Christian.
actress.
Oh, Christian
Chris-
Bale was Lori
Yeah, and my favorite Lori, honestly. And then you had Kirsten
Dunst.
Dunst. Yeah, my brain went
Yeah.
blank. Um, and then you had oh my gosh, how can Claire Danes
Uh-huh.
as Beth. And I felt like these were all really well casted. I always really enjoyed
Mhm.
that version of the story.
Mhm.
Um, but I've always really liked Winona Ryder too. And I'm not a big Susan Sarandon fan, but I think she's very good in this. So
Mhm.
I like her very much as the mother.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, I grew up with that one. And so then I think I might have actually seen the movie before I read the book the first time.
Mhm.
And so, like, I was already used to the idea of Bear bringing her the book and like her writing the book for Beth. And like, I was already comfortable with that. It kind of tied it up with a ribbon, and I was all right with that. So it didn't bother me so much reading it. Like this time, like it was still like, yeah, I can see why they did what they did, but it would have been nice to maybe have gotten a little bit of that courtship, you
Yeah.
know? But
Which I think they tried to put it in with the opera
yeah,
in that version.
yeah,
They go to the opera together and they kind of have their
I have
little
that moment. Yeah.
moment. And that's fine. Like again, like you were saying, like I appreciate it fine. I get it. Having read the book now, being like, oh, there's so much that we missed, but I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
I'm not disappointed. I'm just like,
Okay,
yeah,
so now we're essentially talking movies.
yeah,
So you started with the when 1933, is that the one you said?
yeah. So I went in chronological order.
Okay.
So the 1933, did you watch all of them?
So I watched I watched the Winona Ryder one again with my
Mhm.
sons, and I watched the one with Elizabeth Taylor
Okay,
and Janet Leigh, and then I've already seen the Greta Gerwig one a while ago, and it wasn't any place free to watch it again, and I do not like the movie, so I didn't want to pay for it again. So I didn't
fair
watch it
enough.
again. But I did
Okay,
find the Catherine Hepburn one, but then again, I also
okay.
don't like Catherine Hepburn, so I wasn't too upset. But yeah,
So yeah,
I
so
watched three of
I own all four. Um, that's why I was like, I got four of them.
them. Oh yeah,
So the Katharine Hepburn one, it was 1933,
okay.
black and white. It my notes on it, I have that it's charming because it is charming. Um, all
And
of the
is she the Joe character or who is she?
Hepburn, yeah,
Yeah,
Hepburn
okay.
is Joe, and
Yeah,
she does a fine job. The funny thing is that in that time in 1933, the acting was so hokey. Like there's, Aunt March, old Aunt March, she has that weird little dog, that like poodle or whatever.
yeah.
Like at one point, like she falls asleep and then she wakes up and Joe is not reading to her, and she goes, Josephine, and she literally hucks the dog, like just throws it. I was like, oh my gosh.
What?
Probably that was not a real dog, but
Still.
whoa. And like when Joe falls asleep, she's like sleeping like this. And so she wakes up and she's like, Laurie or Teddy or whatever. And I'm like, nobody sleeps like this and then
Yeah.
wakes up
Especially if
like
it's a Joe-like character. She's not gonna fall
right.
like that.
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
there
Amy
was just
might do
so
that on purpose, but like,
yeah,
yeah.
there was so many like hokey things that I was like,
Hmm.
for what it is, it's adorable. Also, I'm super glad that they remade it.
A bunch of times. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
a bunch of times.
Okay. All right.
Um,
So let's talk the Elizabeth Taylor one. What year did that come out?
1949.
1949. Okay. All right. So your
So,
thoughts on that one?
so this one, I think this one is the MGM one, and you can tell
Yeah.
because all of the women are supposed to be these like beautiful, like, and it's super studded for its time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all of these actually, maybe not so much the Gerwig one, but all of these others, these are all big stars. Maybe Gerwig is too, and I just don't know them because I don't know. I'm old, but
Yeah.
these are like top line A-list actors.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it funny that the Joe character, she's played by like a 32-year-old woman, 33,
Mhm.
and it shows. Like
Yeah.
all the others are clearly women, young women or
Mhm.
girls, even if they're perhaps a little older than their character or whatever.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, Joe is like, "Hey, kiddos, I'm a tomboy," and you're like,
Gosh. What is
"Sweetheart,
the
you're not."
actress's name? Because I was having the hardest time trying to place where else I've seen her.
I don't remember what her name is. Of
Write it
course, I
down.
didn't write it down.
I know I've seen her somewhere else, but yeah, she had a very interesting take on the character. She was like, I don't know, she wasn't horrible, but at the same time she was like, again, very hokey and like over the top and not very natural. Um
Mhm.
I did find it interesting that they made the Amy character older than Beth. So they
Yeah.
did have Elizabeth Taylor be the Amy because,
Hmm.
you got Elizabeth Taylor, so you gotta use her in a pretty role because she's a beautiful woman. So, you know.
Yeah. And
Um,
she is young. She's only like 17 in this one
oh
when
really?
they
Okay.
film. Yeah.
So that works. I did like the portrayal of Beth in this one, like the younger sister. She was very sweet and she's very sensitive. And I like the moments she had with Laurie's grandpa. I thought that was
Hmm.
really well done and sweet.
And I loved watching her play the piano.
Yeah.
The like she like super intense.
Yeah. I did kind of enjoy that weird little like them trying to practice the play thing.
Uh-huh.
It's overly silly and weird. Like, yeah, you'd think they'd be better actors than that. So I do appreciate that they made them better actors, but still in like a melodramatic way in the later movies. But
Yeah.
it was still kind of fun.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, that was
it
so
was like,
fun.
wow, you can tell what entertainment's like in your day. Um, but yeah, it was interesting watching it because, it's all on sound stages. There's, the green screens and it has a very like closed in feel. You don't really go many places. You don't go with Amy to Europe.
Mhm.
You just know that she goes and Lori went too. And so you don't
Yeah.
see that whole side of the story at all because that takes place in another place and they didn't want to do it. And so it's a little weird in a way, like having that relationship just happen without seeing the relationship form, especially when
Yeah.
it's written so well in the book as they grow into a relationship. Because at first it's like, it's really hard to imagine Lori with Amy, with anybody but Joe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the things I always had a hard time with growing up. I always felt like Joe and Lori should have been together. I was like, I learned to appreciate Bear, but I never felt like that there was any actual romantic chemistry there. It just felt like, I don't know. Like, I just didn't get it when I was younger. I like
Yeah.
it more now. I appreciate it more now, but like, it always bugged me that they didn't get together. And but like when you're reading the book, the the nice thing is the author actually takes the time to let them grow together. Let him get used to her as a woman and her get used to the idea of him not being Joe's and like
Yeah.
kind of like grow together and grow to appreciate each other and like fall in love. Like
Yeah.
not like madly in love at first, but like it sort of builds into that. And
Yeah.
I do appreciate that most of these love affairs that happen in the book, they're not like instant love. They're not love for sight. They're kind of slow simmering and then they grow into something.
Yeah.
And
The one that ultimately doesn't work out is the love at first sight when he's like, I loved you the minute I saw you.
yeah.
And that's not real love. Like that was not real, like in love. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah, I like that without pointing it out, that is kind of a lesson to be learned.
exactly. Yeah. Um, I do also appreciate that with Meg's story, Meg and John's story, is that like she wasn't quite sure how she felt until her aunt Marsh like accused him of being a gold digger and wanting to be with her because she had a rich aunt. And she's like, "How
Hmm.
dare you?" And like she
Yeah.
just rejected him, but he was like in the other room, and she just like tells her off, and she's like, "John's not like that at all." Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, "Oh, I just realized I do love him."
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
totally doing this. It's like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, I think sometimes it's like that. Like you don't fully understand how you feel until there's a roadblock in the way, and then you're like, "Wait a second, you can't take the choice from me. This is my choice." And you're like,
Right.
"This is what I really want," and I didn't know it until somebody tried to take the choice from me. So I really
So
like that.
I don't know if this is accurate, but I kind of want to read into the story that Aunt March did it on purpose. That she knew that the girls were a little bit contrary to her, and so she kind of did the whole like, don't marry him, he's poor. Because
Yeah.
it seems like something that she would not just break down and freak out about. It
Mm,
seems like she would, like the Aunt March character in other places was always like, now let's be sensible. Girls, this is, not the way we do it. Oh, I don't know what to do with you. And
yeah.
kind of and then in that case, she's like, don't you do it. Don't you marry him. And she's like,
Yeah.
I'll do what I want. And I kind of like see her just being like,
That's
okay.
correct. I
I
just
don't know if that's
no.
real.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, I don't know. I always got kind of the sense that Aunt Marsh was just like everything had to be a certain way, and when you didn't do it that certain way, then it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And I get that. I feel like I've met people like that in my life. So I think it makes more sense in the book because she walks in on them like all hugging and stuff, and that was very
Right.
inappropriate at that day, or like they're really close
Right.
talking. And so she's like, "What's going on here? What's this?" Like being alone together like that in that day and age was like really inappropriate. And I can see
Right.
her being like shocked that they're being allowed to be alone like this and like having her mind jump to conclusions and like maybe having like a moment of freak out. But yeah, I can see like another version of her being like, this girl doesn't know what to do. I'm gonna help her along. So it
Yeah.
works either
That
way. It
added
works.
added with later when she's like, well, can't support this wedding. She does go to the wedding, but she like says that she's not going to support. And then she provides an entire household linen, which is a big deal. Like normally you provide like a lace tablecloth or something. And she's like, well, I know they're not going to have the appropriate linen, so I'll just have to provide the whole thing. And it becomes kind of like a moment, like they all take a moment to like be like, oh ho ho, we got her. And I'm like, I don't know if you did though. I
Yeah.
think if I was in her place, I would be like, well, I guess I'll just have to give you the biggest deal that I can, like,
Maybe she's the one pulling one over them the whole
right.
time, right? Possible. Old crafty lady. Okay,
4D
so
chess.
What are your main takeaways from the 1949 version?
Yeah,
Basically.
that was the 49. So I feel like you said, all soundstage, lots of makeup. At least Joe and kind of all of them are too old and weird, and they
Yeah.
ham it up the whole time. I was not a fan of it. I wanted to love it, and I really didn't.
Yeah, like there's things I appreciated about it because of like the time and the era and like things that they did at that time where like there's music to everything and music to like emphasize all the feelings. So I was gonna say I don't know how they did it, but somehow they took like all like the charm and charisma out of like Lori and Joe's character and any kind of real chemistry and they like just sucked it dry. So everything just felt so rigid and like wooden. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it was interesting to watch as like a wow, a comparison to other versions and to the book. And like, look how much film is like improved over the years. But yeah, other than that, I don't know that I would recommend it. So-
Yeah, I have to agree. This was during the what do they call it? The studio wars
oh yeah.
of Hollywood. And I think they were just trying to churn out everything they could. They got the right because the original, the 33 version, was not the same studio. And
Mm.
so when these guys got the rights, they probably just,
I'm like,
you know,
let's do it. Yeah.
yeah, we talked about it in Wizard of Oz that they were just like, wheeling and dealing and trying to get the biggest stars, and they were throwing them into crap that was half done. They're writing one scene as they're trying to act another scene. And then they
Yeah.
go, oh, wait, we have to go back because we've changed it for this scene coming later.
Yeah.
Like, I think this just suffered the Hollywood war.
Yeah. Possible. Yeah. Okay. So then next we talk 1997.
I
Or
maybe I wrote 94. I don't
94. Like that's why I keep saying like with a question mark.
yeah.
We'll always fix it in post. We'll put the right year, name, names at the
The
bottom. Okay.
90s.
The 90s. So the 90s version. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit already. That's the one
Mhm.
we kind of grew up with. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that one?
So, because it is what I grew up with, it kind of was the basis for my understanding of the story. And like I said, I appreciated that it wasn't just Joe's story.
Hmm.
Obviously, everything that the movie touches on um, is from the book, except the ending that I understand why they had to change the ending.
Yeah.
But I actually, so I love Susan Sarandon's voice. I don't know why. I love her voice. Just anyways, I wish I hope she does audiobooks. I'm sure she does somewhere.
Sure she has.
I would listen to those audiobooks. I almost don't care what they are.
Like, okay.
But other than that, I didn't like I felt like Susan Sarandon's mommy is Joe. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that
Mm.
she was like talking to a man and she's like, well, if women didn't have to wear corsets, we wouldn't, whatever.
Yeah.
That's not something that mommy would do. Like she
Yeah.
had more class than that. Do you know what
Mm.
I mean?
Okay. Yeah. She was more subtle about making these points than like
Yeah.
all, modern woman. Like,
Yeah.
and I can see that from the books. She was outspoken, but she was also like tactful.
Right.
So I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even notice this growing up. I didn't care. But as an adult, and I have to care about adult things and also read the book, start watching all these movies. And the scene, so in the book, Joe is just sitting at like a gathering when she's living in New York, and they're talking about all these new age gobbledygook.
Hmm.
And she's like, oh, I feel like my head is spinning and this is just so interesting. And then I look at Professor Bear and he's like, don't get pulled into this. Like, you
Yeah.
know, and she's like, oh, okay, yeah. And I liked that instead of doing it that way, in this one, they have the guys that are talking about giving women the vote, right?
Yeah.
And they're like one of them is like, no, it says men have the right to vote in the Constitution or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other guy is like, yeah, for mankind. That's why we gave black people the vote. And now we should also consider women part of the human race. You know, he's
Mhm.
like, they're actually angels compared to us. And the guy, they were arguing emotional, which is not good for voting,
Mhm.
versus angels, which is they should be making the decisions because they're angels, right? And
Yeah.
Winona is given the opportunity, which
By
she would
Bear.
not have been given the opportunity in that time to speak,
Yeah.
but she
Because
was
he's
given
like,
the
"Oh, did you want
opportunity.
to say something?" Like he
Yeah,
gets everybody to quiet down so she can say something as the woman
yeah.
sitting there. And
And then
I just like that.
what she says is perfect. It's exactly right. And of course we have the benefit of hindsight, but she's like, we women should not be given the vote because we're angels. Men don't vote because they're angels. It's not just the best among them that get to vote. They all get to vote because they're all citizens. I'm required to live the same laws that you're required to live, but you're allowed to make a choice on what those laws are, and I'm not. That's the difference. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
very well put.
that's exactly it's exactly in keeping with her character. It's
Yeah.
exactly what I feel like is exactly the right argument. Like, you know, like I was like, that was so great. I was so glad that they gave her that moment because that was 100% Joe. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. And that I feel like that is better than him just being like, "Don't get involved." This is
Yeah.
like, and I get what they were trying to do in the book was more like there's all these crazy ideas out there and everybody's, all over the place. And like, yeah, Bear had a moment in the book where he gets to go over and like just, tear into somebody about why God
Hmm.
is important and blah 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, that's a nice moment for Bear. But I like the moment in that version of the movie better because it's a nice moment for him because he's seeing that she wants to communicate, she has something to say,
Hmm.
and that as the woman in the room, she is the best person to ask. And so
Right.
he goes out of his way to quiet everybody down, make sure she can say something because they're all just, they barely even know she's there. So there's like a very nice moment for him. He's being a gentleman. He
Hmm.
noticed that she wanted to say something. He's making sure she can say something. He
Yep.
he's like being an advocate for her. And then she
Yep.
gets to say her thing and like prove that, yeah, we should be listening to her. She has something to say. And
Hmm.
anyways, I really like that scene in
Yeah.
the movie.
Yep.
So
Oh, I was also going to say on this is, I think, the only movie that had two characters that played Amy.
yes. Yes.
And I love that because the book takes like 15 years from start to finish. In the beginning, Joe is like 15 or 16,
Hmm.
and it ends with her being 30 or in her early 30s or something like that.
Yeah.
And so like the concept of having like a little Amy versus when she's older, she would look different and she would, and I understand they kind of condense the story for the movies a lot of times. They don't take
Hmm.
a full 15 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But I liked that. And I liked that all of the actors, actresses, and actors, they all felt like they fit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Kirsten Dunst felt like the right young Amy,
Yeah.
and Winona Ryder felt like the right
Joe.
Joe.
Yeah.
Like to me, they all felt right.
Hmm.
And I really like that, including Mr. Bear, because the description of him is like sometimes they make him like this like kind of nerdy like bookwormy guy,
Hmm.
but that's not actually the description of him in the book.
Yeah.
So
Like,
I like that they.
yeah, they made him sound like he was a handsome middle-aged man, but he had this fun nature, like, and he wants to
Hmm.
get on the ground and play with the kids, and like just sings opera, and he just is this very full of life, fun
Yeah.
personality, and he's always helping people, and so like, yeah, it's kind of a strange combination, like the way they make him sound in the book is half like adorable and half kind of like, oh, it's an old man, like
Yeah.
so. I do like this version because I think the actor that got to play Bear is definitely still a handsome man and like
Hmm.
still come off as like a very gentle soul, but I can still see
Hmm.
how she would respect him and fall for him. And I do
Right.
appreciate that moment they had at the opera. Like, and he's translating it for her, and it's kind of like this quiet moment, and it's just a natural like thing. And I was like, oh, that's what we need. We need a little more of their chemistry to be there,
Yeah.
and you don't get that with a lot of the versions.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. Um, I do feel like everybody's pretty well cast for this. I love Eric Stoltz as John. I thought he did a really good job of being that character and he fit that role.
Hmm.
Absolutely. My favorite Laurie is Kristen Bell because I don't think anybody pulls it off. Like he did it so well. He was the funny and over the top, silly, kind of brilliant character. And then he did the moody, grumpy, rejected lover part really well. And then
Hmm.
like he was a sweetheart, but he was also a total like scoundrel. Like he's a really fun character in the book because he's like half brother, half like dreamboat, half
Yeah.
menace. And like he's kind of just an incorrigible, crazy character, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and so Christian Bale, like the whole world was in love with him. It was the
Yeah.
90s.
He was big.
He was big. Everybody that liked boys had a crush on him. I don't care who you are. If
Yes.
you say you
You
don't,
saw
you're lying to
Newsies, you
me.
saw this, you saw the other movies. Like he was pretty big in the 90s, yeah.
Yes, he was a big deal, and like he made it like you were rooting for him. The older ones, I was not really rooting for either Lori. They like you said with the 49 and also in the or 40 whatever that was, and also in the 33 version, they made him like weird like I'm clearly a 40-year-old man, but I never grew up, and you're like I just I'm not into you. Like
You're like, no. Yeah.
Whereas Bale is so charismatic. He just is. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know anything about him in his personal life, and I don't care because I know him on screen, and on screen, he's just charismatic. It is hard not to love whatever character he is because of what he brings to it.
Yeah, he's definitely has a presence so you want to watch him. And like I feel like he did a great job with this character, like all the different facets of this character, because it's a very complex character actually. There's a
Hmm.
lot that he goes through through the course of the book himself.
Yeah.
And I felt the chemistry, that there was a possibility of actual romantic chemistry between him and Winona Ryder. Like, I think part of why it was hard for me to like fully get into the bear romance later on because I felt like those guys had such great chemistry and I could see that working out. And like, actually, I started writing my own story with sort of a similar personality characters that like they do end up together because of this movie. But I never finished writing it, but it's out there somewhere. And at some point, I might actually turn it into a book. But just, random thing and inspired. Um, but yeah, it's harder in this movie than any of the other ones to be like, no, to not be like screaming at the screen, Joe, what are you doing? It's
Yeah.
Kristen Bell. This is the
Right.
greatest Lori ever. This is hands down the best Lori. So,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah. I
personally,
love him.
the best Joe. I think I honestly just felt like this the best everybody.
Yeah. Like I said, this one was cast perfect for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like when I first was thinking that, like I hadn't rewatched it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the others and I was, picking at this one and picking at that one. And I was like, maybe it's just because I grew up with this one and I grew up loving this version that I'm like, but they're not as good. And maybe if I rewatch it now, because I have not
Yeah.
watched it in years and years, maybe I won't have that same, I'll be like, why did I hold this up on
Why
such a
make such a big
pedestal?
deal out of it?
No,
Yeah.
I still love it. It's still my favorite of the four that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now we come to the most recent one, the 2019. Greta Gerwig directed. Um, I don't remember the main actress's name well enough.
I
I'm
don't
pretty sure I'm
either.
gonna butcher it. I'm gonna just write it down because I know I'm gonna say it wrong. But she was kind of an it girl for a while. She was in a lots of things. So you have hers, Joe. You have Emma Watson from Harry
Hmm.
Potter as Meg,
Which
which
I didn't realize that until I started watching it, and I was like, hey,
wait a
he's
second.
here.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of an odd choice because yes, I get that she's older now, but she's still a very demure, very small person,
Hmm.
and she doesn't have like a big sister presence to me. So I felt
Yeah,
like I felt like that was an odd choice. Like it was hard for me
yeah,
to see her as the older sister, especially with the actress playing Joe has so much bigger personality and just seems so much older than her.
yeah. Which I feel like kind of does work for Meg, specifically because like I said, I kind of identify with her. So I'm the oldest of four kids.
Hmm.
And ironically, right after me is my brother.
Yeah.
So the tomboy is an actual brother
Yeah.
in my story. You know what I mean? But oh, also I was supposed to point out I do have a Beth and I do have a Meg. I have four daughters, and
Oh
one
wow.
is Beth and one is Meg. They were
Oh
not named
wow.
after the characters of this book. It just happened that way.
You're right. I didn't even think about that.
Like when I was talking about it, they were like, "We have a Beth and a Meg. Is that why you named us that?" No, it
You're
just
like,
happened
no.
that way.
Or there would be an Amy and a Joe too,
Exactly.
because you have four
But
daughters.
but yeah, I felt like she was fine as an individual. Like if this was not the story that I knew so well, and I just saw Emma Watson playing this character, I would have thought she was fine.
Hmm.
But
She's
because
not terrible.
yeah, but because there's so much now wrapped up into it for me, I feel like I'm like invested in this story now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There, it was a little bit like,
Hmm. Okay.
okay, so Hermione, Beauty and the Beast, and
Yeah.
sure, I guess also Meg. Why not?
Okay. All
You
right.
know.
Fine. Florence Pugh. She plays Amy. Um,
Okay.
and yes, I agree that I prefer it when Amy actually grew up because it is a big jump in time. And
Hmm.
yes, there'd be some similarities. And yeah, sometimes you look a lot like what you did when you were younger. But with girls, you literally go through a metamorphosis, like where you change from a little girl into a woman. And
Hmm.
I do like that they had a separate Amy for little Amy and grown up Amy. And I think it also helps with the being able to transition with the idea of Lori falling in love with her because she's not a
Hmm.
little girl anymore. Like she's literally a different person now. So Florence Pugh, I had a hard time with her being the younger Amy. She felt like this is clearly a woman in her 20s and 30s playing a
Hmm.
little girl and being like overly like over the top. I mean, I generally like Florence, I've liked her in other things I've seen her in, but this is probably the first thing I saw, and I was like, I don't know. I don't feel like she was the best choice, or maybe they had her. And sometimes it's not the actor's fault when they give a certain delivery, because if the director's demanding you got to do it this way, you give them what they want, unless you're a diva and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. But so I don't know if it's just that they tried to, in an effort to make her seem younger, they made her more like dumbed down or more silly, and that's why her performance as younger Amy isn't very good.
Yeah.
It's not terrible, but it's especially compared to other things I've seen her do, it's like her weakest work. Um, but then her as an older Amy is, it's like okay, she's fine, but yeah, like it wasn't the best Amy.
Yeah. On the topic of Amy, one of the other things that I don't totally understand why they make this change, but they made it in the first movie and they keep reiterating it, is that in the book, Amy like talks about early on, she's like, "Oh, this girl at school, she drew a very unflattering picture of the teacher and she got in lots of trouble, and you know what? She deserved it. She should never have done something like that. I'm glad that I know better than to do that." And then later she gets in trouble because limes, like pickled
Yeah,
limes, which sounds absolutely disgusting,
yeah, it sounds
but
disgusting.
that was the thing, right? And like
Uh-huh.
all the other girls were sharing limes and they were like, when are you going to bring yours? And so,
Yeah,
and that's why she got in trouble, was because she brought the contraband
yeah,
to school, right?
yeah.
The 90s version, they do it that way, and I appreciate that. But all of the other, I can't remember if the 19 version, um,
2019.
I don't remember how the 2019, I don't remember how they deal with Amy at school, but I just kept seeing in the older ones, and I think also in this last one, that they have her drawing the
No.
picture. I can't remember now if that was in this one as well. But they keep having her getting in trouble because she's drawing the picture. And I'm like, no, she specifically doesn't draw the picture because she has more respect, because she's a better person than that. She
Yeah.
gets in trouble due to
Because she cares what
her
other people think of her and she's trying to fit.
right.
She's being
Right.
vain. Yeah.
Like it's not in keeping with her character at all. And it makes a huge difference when she grows up because who she is as a grown up was like almost defined by that moment, by what she got in trouble for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it just that kind of irked me because I'm like, her story arc went a very specific way, and then they keep cheapening it, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. So they did that in like the 1949 one where
Hmm.
like they did more with like they didn't show Amy in Europe, but they showed Amy in school. And again,
Hmm.
it was kind of hilarious seeing all these women, grown up women,
Hmm.
dressed like they're little girls and acting like little girls in school. And in that version, it was her friend that drew it, but she got caught because she had it because she was showing it
Right.
to her. But then like she didn't want to tattle on her, so she didn't tell, and then she got in trouble. And then she had this whole speech when she walks out. She's like, "I'm never coming back to school." And then she's like, "Oh, like
Yeah.
she's still putting on airs. She's still not really learning anything."
Right.
And so
And
they
I
did
know
that
they
instead of the limes in that version.
Yeah, and they did in the 33 version, she just got in trouble because she was just the one that like she drew the picture and then she gets in trouble for it. And I
Yes,
can't remember about the 2019.
I don't remember. I don't remember
I
that
don't remember
episode.
either. I just remember being so frustrated by the end of it. I'm like, Amy has a very specific personality type and a very specific way to grow and become better.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they cheapened it
Yeah,
in what they did. But that was just a weird little aside that I forgot to say earlier.
yeah. Okay. I don't remember the actress that played Beth all that well. Like she didn't stick with me. Like I'm
Yeah,
having the
I don't
hardest time
either.
remembering who they were, and like she just didn't make much of an impression apparently.
Hmm.
Um, I liked Laura Dern okay as the mom. She was fine. She, again, I think Susan Sarandon is better, but she did fine for what the part that she's in. It's fine.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, the main actress playing Jo. I have mixed feelings about this actress. There's some things I've liked her in, and then other things that I don't like her in. Um, this is definitely not something I like her in. Like she felt like I don't know, like she's trying too hard to be the character. And
Hmm.
like she's, I don't know, just a little too much.
Hmm.
And I don't know
I
how to
feel
explain it.
like it might have been direction,
It could be, yeah.
at least in part. I mean, sometimes you can have an actor like Christian Bale that regardless of what director he gets, regardless of how the writing is, like he is going to be
Yeah, and
excellent
exactly.
regardless of what you tell him to do. And maybe she just doesn't have that or I don't know. But there was a lot of decisions made that I didn't like. Like
Yeah,
there was a lot of times that I was like, that was the one you went with? How bad were all the other takes that was, you know what I mean, or whatever.
that's the one you chose. Yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
also felt like they kept trying to put modern day sensibilities into an 1860 story. And I
Yes.
hate when they do that. If you're going to do a period piece, respect the era that it's in. Don't put your modern
Amen.
day ideas into past like stories because it doesn't make sense. It wouldn't have been that way. Like we
100%.
we are where we are now because we have an arc too as a human race and like we've grown and changed and evolved too. You can't put ideas from now into there.
Yes.
It's just ridiculous. So it's like
Yes.
expecting like a little kid to understand the things they should know as an adult. It doesn't it doesn't work. And so I didn't like those modern sensibilities that kept kind of coming out. So not a big fan of her as Joe. She wasn't terrible, but I've definitely seen her do better at work. Now let's
Yep.
get to the big elephant in the room for me. So Timothy, I can't say his last name.
Charlemagne? I think you
Chalamet.
say Charlemagne. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I just ah, so I get there's certain actors I don't like, and there's actors I despise. I really don't like him. I really don't like him. The only thing I've seen him in so far that I thought he was even halfway decent in was Wonka. And I went into
Hmm.
that like ready to cringe and be unhappy the whole time. And he had a few moments where he did something that was dumb or like it was a bad delivery, but he was okay. He was better than I expected. But and he's the whole reason why him and I'm not a fan of Zendaya are the whole reason why I won't watch the Dune movies because, and I love the Dune show from the 80s, and I've always wanted to read the book. I haven't. I keep meaning to. But oh my gosh. He's so, he's like a little boy, and they're trying to put him in a man's part. And like, so there's the other thing. The thing that drives me crazy about Hollywood is they decide that somebody's the it girl or the it boy, and then they shove them into everything. They put them in all the movies, and they're like, "You all love this person, right?" And it's like, no, they're terrible for this part. They were right for this, but they're not right for that. Stop doing that, Hollywood. It's really annoying. Like, I might have actually liked him more if you hadn't tried to shove him down my throat, but because you're trying to put him in everything, it's like, oh gosh, please stop. Just stop. So I don't think he's right for the majority of the parts that he's played, and especially not for this. He's a terrible, terrible Laurie. I don't like his delivery. I can't get over the fact that he feels like a tiny little boy next to the actress that plays Joe. Just seems like she's gonna like beat him up. Like he's not a man. And like I get that he is grown up, but he doesn't look like a grown up. Doesn't act like a grown up. And I think my problem again is that I grew up with Christian Bale. And Christian Bale is great in just about everything. Even like
Right.
Newsies and his early stuff when like he was kind of just still building his craft, he wasn't terrible, terrible, like ever. So it's hard to fit like jump into the shoes of an actor like that who actually has sex appeal, who actually is charming and is attractive and like entertaining to watch, and then have this, oh my gosh, I don't want to be mean, but like I really don't like this guy. I I don't get the appeal. I don't get why he has a career. I don't. He was okay in Wonka. And that's a big admission for me because I was prepared to hate him in that. Um, so he ruins the movie for me. Even though there are other things I'm not liking as I'm going along, he really makes it hard for me to care about the Joe Laurie dynamic. 'Cause at this point, I'm like, "Ah, of course you're not going to marry that guy. Of course you're not. Like he's an infant. Like he doesn't just act immature, he looks immature. It made there's no you don't feel bad when she rejects him. You don't. Because like it just doesn't make sense. They don't have the chemistry. And which is sad
Right.
because they're in two movies together. They're also in Lady Bird together,
Mhm.
which I don't like. I think that's a terrible movie. And again, I think Greta Gerwig is totally overblown and people make a big fuss over and she's not as good as they make her to be. Even like the Barbie movie, oh my gosh, there's so many problems with that. But anyways, we're not gonna get into that. I'm not gonna get into that. But they were in Lady Bird, directed by Greta Gerwig, and together. And I guess she wanted to get them in Barbie, but it didn't work out. And I'm like, thank goodness. That would have made it so much worse. Um, Anyways, I don't think they have chemistry. They didn't have chemistry in that movie. They didn't have chemistry in this movie. And I don't think he works for that part. And then when they have him do the whole mopey, like rejected lover thing, it's just so bad. So bad. And then like he gets together with Amy and I'm like, I see no chemistry between him and Florence Pugh. I don't buy him as his character. I don't care about him as his character.
So do you know the one part that I loved was when he's like, "Oh, I guess you're gonna marry Fred Vaughn," and then he's like, he has like the glass of champagne. He's like, "Come on, everybody!"
Perhaps you're fantasizing about spending Fred Vaughn's fortune. Fred Vaughn, ladies and gentlemen.
I laughed so hard at that. I don't know why. I like didn't expect it or something, but I
Yeah.
laughed so hard at that, and I'm like, I know I wasn't supposed to laugh, but it made me laugh really hard.
Let's talk about the ending. So in the ending of the movie, they make it seem like she in reality, Joe, didn't go after Bear. That she just wrote that in the version of the book
Hmm.
for like, happy little sentimentality. But in reality, she didn't.
Right.
So
Yeah.
essentially she didn't grow up, she didn't evolve. She didn't become a better person. She just decided, and it was like they didn't get the whole point of the story.
Right.
That like the
It
whole
almost
time,
made it almost made it look like none of it was real. Like all of it
yeah, they're
was
like, was it all made up? Like,
I didn't like how they ended it at all. And I
yeah,
even like that they showed the school at the end with the sister Amy's showing the art and the
yeah,
whatever whatever your specialty was, you got to show the kids now. I
yeah.
actually really liked that.
That
But I
is
was
cool.
like, this feels like Inception. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where in the end he's in his dream.
You're
Do you know what
like,
I'm talking about?
did they understand the book at all? Did they even read
Yeah.
the book?
I'm
Or did they
like,
just watch the other movies and go, oh, we're gonna do this. And we're
yeah.
gonna modernize it. We're gonna make it where she doesn't fall in love with the guy. I'm like, you guys did not understand the story at all. You didn't get it.
Yeah,
And
I have
like,
to admit, I don't like Gerwig's stuff. I almost didn't watch this one because I don't like her stuff. I cannot think of a Greta Gerwig anything that I have liked.
yeah, there's things I like about the Barbie movie. Mainly is Ryan Gosling. But
Yeah.
mainly. Yeah, that's mostly it. I feel like there was missed opportunities in that movie. The things they could have done that would have been good and might have gotten my respect, but it's overblown. Everybody else likes this great movie. It's well made, and there's some good things about it that I appreciate. Some things that made me laugh, but there's a lot of stuff that's like, guys, you need to stop pushing this like anti-man agenda, and we need to stop being. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
for
Hey
that
guys,
one, and actually, so for both of those, for the Barbie movie and also for this one, I feel like they preach against themselves. Like the movie preaches against itself over and over again.
yeah,
And
it's
like it's
confusing.
like girl power, and then like going after girl power actually messed up Joe's life. And they're like, oh, girl power? Like, I'm like, what is it?
How about everyone power and we learn to love and respect each other and have a balance and harmony and not make it men good, women bad, or women good,
Right.
man bad. Like we're
Yeah.
two parts of the same thing. So I'm just ranting about a lot of different things that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. But so let's wrap this up. In conclusion, um, I think we agree that the Winona Ryder one is the best. The
Best,
90s had it
easily.
right. There were some interesting things they did in the newer one, but none of them
Yeah.
were good enough to make up for all the mistakes in the old.
Right. I feel like none of them are awful. All four versions have something to contribute. Also,
Yeah,
if you're
something.
only gonna watch one, watch the 90s one with
Yeah,
Winona Ryder and Christian Bale.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's the one. Also, I think for the book, do like you did and read it over again. Different phases in your life,
Mm-hmm.
read it again after you have a baby, when you become a grandma, when whatever, you
Yeah,
move across the country, read it again and see what new you glean from it.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a great book about the different phases about womanhood and how a woman grows and her place in family and society. I think there's a lot of things you can draw from it, and I just think it's a wonderful book. It's great, and there's a reason why people are still making new versions of it. It's a masterpiece. It's wonderful. So, okay, that was my movie this time. So, what are we reading next time?
So I'm going back into a little bit of kids. So much of me, by the way, after your little thing, wanted to be like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, just
No,
for
it's
you.
like,
But that was not what I was.
well,
That
we
was
could
not
do
what I
that
was
because
going
I
for.
do like the 70s one, and
Yeah.
I do like Johnny Depp, even though the Tim Burton one's kind of weird. I kind of like it still, sort
I
of.
mean, we can do that sometime. My plan was for this time is doing Bridge to Terabithia.
Oh, okay. All right. So my son actually read that book. I bought the movie not knowing what I was getting into. So we actually do own the movie,
Sweet.
even though I never read the book. So my son read it. So I'll read it, and I'm sure
Yes.
he'll watch it with me, and we can talk about like because he was really upset with the movie. Is all I know.
Oh,
He didn't like the way it
so
was turned to a movie. So
I have not seen the whole movie. I read the book when I was in school, like elementary school,
okay.
and then all four of my kids have read it and they have watched the movie, and I know that it has been on, and I'm like, oh, Bridge to Terabithia, but I've never actually sat down and watched it. So
Okay. Yeah, I never heard of it until I randomly accidentally bought it through like the Disney Movie Club. Like back when my kids were tiny. So, I watched it and been like, I never heard of it. But anyways, so I actually watched the movie first. So I'm going to read the book now. And I guess I've done that a lot with a lot of these things. But
That's all right.
we'll see how it measures up. That sounds interesting. Cool.
Cool.
All right. So for Little Women and Paperback Flicks, I'm Ruth Craddock.
I'm Rae Davidson.
And we will see you guys next time. Bye.